Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. You are in for such a treat tonight. Really, two of my favorite poets and two of my favorite people reading together. I am introducing both of them at the beginning, and Naomi will read first and Hilary will read afterwards. Both Naomi Mulvihill and Hilary Sallick have spent their lives dedicated to both poetry and education. Hilary is a teacher with a long-time focus on adult literacy. For 7 years, she served on the board of the New England Poetry Club. Her deep interest in the intersection of learning, poetry, and community grounds all her work. Tonight, we're celebrating the publication of her third book, Love is a Shore. Naomi is a former fellow at the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center and has been a veteran bilingual teacher in the Boston Public Schools. Her chapbook, We All Might Be, received the 2022 Tomaž Šalamun Prize Editor's Choice Selection. Her new book is The Knife Thrower's Girl. I believe both books are available tonight. And it was the winner of the Washington Prize. If you were going to compare these two remarkable poets, you might say that one of them has a dense lucidity and the other one has a lucid density. I'm not going to say which is which. Hilary Sallick's poems in Love is a Shore meet the eye with a seductive directness, an engaging transparency of language that pulls you in. Then you find beneath that clear surface a centered complexity of feeling. Naomi Mulvihill's poems in The Knife Thrower's Girl have an elusive, dreamlike, sometimes scary surface. Yet beneath that surface lie the clear, often raw emotions underlying dreams, memories, and nightmares. What's going on here? For example, in her deeply touching, quietly defiant closeness, Hilary gets too near a heron for another bird watcher's approval. Quote, I try to see without intruding, she confides to us, then admits, I want things and I go too close. These lines could be the motto for all her poems. Curious, heroically, even subversively observant, she watches as she writes in another poem from, quote, the middle of the space. I have a thing on, but I can't. The circumference of the world surrounds me. That careful, unstoppable observation of the world and its inhabitants is her great gift as a poet and her great gift to us. Naomi's poems, like the central figure in her title poem, The Knife Thrower's Girl, keep changing shape. Quote, because you will not come into my grief, I will shape yours, she warns. Quote, because you will not, I will. Every exchange a permutation of the first. In her extraordinary sequence in the Garden of Intelligence, she magically transmogrifies herself into, among other figures, Hikmet, Mayakovsky, Audre Lorde, Sappho, Mother Goose, Janis Joplin, and Ovid. One of my favorite of her poems, called Polly Ambi, in that poem, she begins by saying that she is writing a book where there's a blessing for everything, even shredded wheat, even an earthquake. And at the end, she asks us to bless the unknowable, bless the implausible, bless the ambivalent. Tonight, we are all unambivalently blessed to be in the company of Naomi Mulvihill and Hilary Sallick.
Okay. Right? Yes.
Okay, wasn't that the best introduction anyone's ever heard to anything?
Yeah.
Lloyd, thank you. That was so beautiful. And I think most of those poems I'm not going to read, so he gave you a little bit of them anyway. Let's see, I don't know really where to put things.
You do.
Move it down this side.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to thank James and the Grolier. James is the person who creates these readings and does all the footwork and makes it beautiful. And I just want to say what an extraordinary space to be in and a history to stand in. I feel surrounded by other writers. I also want to thank all of you for coming. It's always like a drag to come out, but thank you so much for being here. And to the Zoom people who are joining us via Zoom, thank you, especially to all my teachers and family, without whom I would not be here. I'm going to start with the dedication. I just, as a warning to anyone, I cry a lot and it could happen. So the book is dedicated with love to Antonia, Alexa, Judith, Francesca, Catherine, Lisa, and Jessie, all my innermost. And there's several quotes. Come and see my home. It's any place where nobody gives orders. That's by Bessie Head, an amazing South African writer. I'm in a certain hurry to feel everything. That's Clarice Lispector, a Brazilian writer. Step inside. In the cellophane pages of an anatomical atlas, one system overlays the last. Under a bone dome, the brain, a scarred bride, drags her nervous train. Was it to purge herself of herself that my mother gave birth? We were a body composite, 7 of us, stunted and overbrimming, our own God. My sister sits on her hams in this dream I keep having, rigged with a bomb in her chest, set to detonate. She's the instant abscessed. Would she relent if she could? An ancient book of the body gives us a figure, a knife in one hand, his skin in the other. I want to hold her. Valverde de Amusco plagiarized flagrantly from a work by Andreas Vesalias. Later, many of the remaining plates were credited to Gaspar Becerra, an apprentice of Michelangelo's. As that flayed man crossed centuries, radiant with a burden he couldn't dispose of, Barely 16, I pumped gas and sold cigarettes at the Sunoco. I must have thought my mother would rescue me from my boss, a roguishly handsome mechanic who kept a 38 by the register. He had a habit of running his hands under my shirt. Packed with black powder, the subcutaneous fuse takes its signal by remote. Was the plagiarist merely lazy? I asked my sister. I'm all hers, the heart's lopsided knot, the incipient glass. Is it damuscos or becerras or the flayed man's skin? What makes us a single person, she says, is our fear of being separated for good. I recently heard Queen Latifah asked in an interview, what was the hardest part of growing up? And she said, learning to be a girl. An instant before impact. Wasn't I a straight boy when I went home with him? Didn't he tell me his mother had killed a child one night on the coast road? He had a room above the garage. One story below, a small dark pool gathered under the car. Tools leaned against the walls. A mat of grass dried inside the mower. I didn't understand the bed and bare rafters then, or the window's 3 panes, a triptych's parsed view, marsh, still water, our faces and hands flattened and given back as glass. Pocked with a few whitish stars, the sky riffled the tree line, turning and turning the leaves' silvery undersides. From up there, I could have watched us. When he tried to make my body his, when he moved through me like panic through a crowd, we multiplied into a jagged tangle of limbs and then thinned again to a familiar symmetry. I had wanted the room to become surf, but only a faint smell of surf was there around the pain of form crystallizing as I turned into myself, a stunned girl. Necessity. When I worked in an orphanage, a boy came to harvest sugarcane in what he'd worn to work the street at a beach resort. His bunkmates picked up volcanic rock I later learned geologists call scoria, a word whose root gives us slag, dreck, and excrement. At the field's edge, they stoned him. I see his diminishing blue still, the turbulence of his dress as he ran. Out of jealousy or boredom, they also killed each other's adopted strays. Then I didn't know what it was to wake in a woman's bed and enter the world, sure her touch must show on my skin. They're so quiet. Someone can make noise. Other song of myself. I realized I always read this in kind of a dry, nervous way. And it's not supposed to be like that, so it comes off that way. Other song of myself. To the one who's ingested an open safety pin, ribs louver-like, letting in the X-rays blue evanescence, a softness against which the metal tenses. Call this a case of a sharpness safer swallowed. To the one covered in spurs and galls for whom everything hurts, the curtain's white muslin, the muted tick of steel down the hall. To the shirtless girl whose heart holds her body ransom, and the boy who arches his back and laughs when there's nothing to laugh at. In bewildered recognition of the throng we are and are not supposed to be, the teeming entirety, to wry neck and blindness of various kinds, to every sort of fleshly extravagance, mix and match genital ensemble, bulge and twist, welcome. Sonia says, so what if the better part of life is spent ugly and unaware, eating alone in an unlit room? My stepmom said, I'm irked by your vulnerability, your obtuseness. Earlier that morning, I read out loud from a book on garden pests that described a kind of borer, something like a living tube of suet whose sole defense is to recoil and vomit. Her comment was unconsciously related and somewhat true. She's all about a plover feigning a broken wing to distract a fox from her eggs. Why not make a beautiful display of desperation? I'm about a blur of internal undulations. If a sexual spasm could be encapsulated and let loose to roam the earth, each wriggling movement a revolt against the knowable, that might give you an idea of the borer's MO. Some days I see no one, vulnerable, obtuse. I'll take it a step further. Don't look like a disaster bag, she wanted to say, zipped around a victim. Don't be something I can't name. Funny thing is, they're all intimation. Would that be an eye? That a leg? Unfuckable, and inside is a someone. A little noise over there. Poetry. Child of a lighthouse housekeeper and a fire watch, conceived in a wordless encounter at a rest stop. 1 part flywheel, 8 parts restrain, luminous with near disaster, says, don't try to mirror this world of nothing is as it seems. Set down no word. Says, by means of a searching pause, I mistake for an intimate nod. Step inside the caution tape. The little context of this poem, it's called cesium-137. It's a highly radioactive element. And in 1987 in Goiânia, Brazil, there was a civilian radioactive accident. So it centers on that. Cesium-137. A man, excuse me. A man means to make a ring for his wife. For you, I mean to make a poem. The man lives on the periphery of a distant city. We live around the corner from a methadone clinic on a charmless street. Realtors call it a neighborhood in transition. At home in the scrapyard's oxides, its smell of motor oil and hemoglobin, the man is a purveyor of junk and treasure. We are trying to salvage ourselves. A delicate, awful matter, someone is apt to get hurt. Driven by what's in there and what can be redeemed, a few employees extract a cylinder from a piece of abandoned medical machinery. They puncture the capsule with simple tools. My life has been a confused and elaborate effort to outsmart the ordinary. An ectoplasmic blue, the man takes it from the workshop into the bedroom. One night I say, we'll all die without ever really knowing each other. A perpetual loneliness I recklessly call boredom. Novelty proffers itself. The future glows through the seams in the top dresser drawer. Of the two of us, I am the more destructive. You launch yourself at tedium by putting your hands on things, tending the rose. Suffering buds up, reciprocated with blossoms of suffering. Will one of them go before he learns how to work his medium, or will they both of overexposure? The red talc gathers fingerprints. Your hand in sleep reaches, rotating a wrist, you open your fist, a magician performing a dove trick. Longing turns a body into a clock. I am afraid. This is how love looks. Okay, I have to read this straight off because I'll get emotional. So I'm just gonna be, just read it straight off. This poem is from my brother-in-law, Fred. Fred didn't begin to paint until 5 or so years ago. Painting had to wait for him to leave his profession as a pediatric radiologist and researcher. Painting also had to wait for him to become an expert at living with Parkinson's disease. Being an expert at living with Parkinson's means figuring out how to use every ounce of energy you can garner to will your muscles to do things like brush back a lock of your own hair or lift a glass of water to your lips while learning to love yourself at the same time. At any rate, 20 years into his diagnosis, Fred became a painter. I very much admire his art. If you're tuning in by Zoom, James is going to screen share some of his work. Your work, Fred, because you're here with us via Zoom as well. In the poem, I refer to Van Eyck, a Flemish painter active in the 1400s. He's famous for capturing the most minute detail, pores in skin, the folds of an ear, each hair of a fur collar. I also mentioned Cabeza de Vaca, a Spanish explorer who spent 8 years lost in the Southwest and seemed to have learned a great deal by being lost. Finally, Canned Heat is a psychedelic blues rock group. Now, for Fred. Some part of you dutifully folds and misfolds proteins until in your own body you are entangled, led out of the eye by small irregular steps. You've taken up painting in the style of Van Eyck. I can imagine no worse idea or more perfect. How, I ask, knowing how one hand holds the other's clamor. A more psychedelic Van Eyck, dreamy, haphazard, forecasting Cabeza de Vaca and his eccentric dead reckoning, lost in the scrub of the fourth horseman's beard in the altar of Ghent, as he hummed along with Canned Heat. At odds with, at the mercy of, in the service of, at full tilt. The brain works roundabout. Roundabout, a lunge incites your right arm to rise, dyskinetic, casting away a hand, which comes to rest near your throat with a touch that startles your torso, as if tapped by a stranger on the back. Back up the hand goes, circling, condensing, refining emotion through a set of consciously imposed limits to become a gesture, tender, familiar, a slight pressure between thumb and index finger on the lower and upper rim of your glasses. Delicate adjustment that by millimeters brings us immeasurably closer. Certitude arrived at by dint of palsy. See me, I am sad and beautiful, your body says. Retreating, I approach. Open your eye, let me in. The context is that I was born into both the Cold War and the space race, and sometimes it feels strangely like we're in it again. The title Sea of Crisis is named for one of the lunar seas, and the lunar seas have very beautiful names like Sea of Nectar, Sea of Vapors. sea of tranquility. Sea of crisis. A steamer burned and capsized one October, setting loose its cargo of apples and people, material for a parable. One November, a mongrel named Laika launched on an elliptical orbit, circled my parents before they were my parents. Dead only a few hours into her journey, she spun weightless, an idea realized. Someone said, if a dog, then a man. So we had men in a 250,000-mile thrall snapping photos of their own planet with Hasselblads. They read Genesis televised. The whole world was aboard. My parents, by now, had waited 6 years in. Off air, the astronauts horse-traded bacon squares and beef bites laughingly, but something was different. One said, back where the earth used to be, and the words filled with epigraphic reverb. Apples and people. What I know grows infinitesimal in my dory. I row facing land, my back to where I'm going. Of Laika, we know hardly anything at all. Part terrier, part husky, life in a sequence of smaller and smaller cages prepared her for outer space. There's something. And this is the poem, the one that Lloyd mentioned, Holly Ambi. I'm writing a book where there's a blessing for each thing, even shredded wheat, even an earthquake. When I try to figure it out, silence snows me in. On a song, there's a bird in the yard that won't decide, mocks them all, gull, jay, car alarm. There's the man who leaps off a cliff in a wingsuit and a mole that hunts the dunes by seismic cues. As fast as a path opens ahead, the sand collapses. Tiny stranger, alien multitude. The only baby I ever made came at the end of the 3rd month. Outside, the first blades of grass vent themselves along cracks in the asphalt. Under a privet, violets condense and the shadows overlap. Matter and its absence, the bird sings. Bless the unknowable, bless the implausible, bless the ambivalent. Thank you so much. I want to say that it's such a pleasure and an honor to get to read with Hilary. Hilary's a dear friend, but also when you get to hold her book in your hands and take it home with you and live with it, you will be so happy. All this debris out of here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Naomi. That was amazing. I'm just going to start with one short poem, The Gulls. As the tide came in at dusk, a gull on a reef in the half-empty bay called over and over its message. 2 more came, crying across the water, then more still, until 14 of them were gathered on the rocky perches and fell silent. They didn't seem to be doing anything at all. lined up together at the end of the day for those minutes, water lapping against their rocks, the strands of reddish brown seaweed floating up, lifted by the bay. And I wanted to begin with that poem because the gulls sort of remind me of all of us, and also of poetry, which often doesn't seem to be doing anything at all. Naomi, if you could look in my orange bag, I think I'm going to have to break down and wear my reading glasses, which I've been resisting over these last few years, but the moment has come where I think I'm going to be happier if I have them. And before I read anymore, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone for being here tonight. It is just, the support is so beautiful. It really, really feels amazing. And thanks to family and friends on Zoom. Thank you, James, around the corner there. Thank you to Lily Poetry Books for publishing my book. I'm so grateful. Okay, another short one somewhere here. So much for the Post-it notes. I had it all like, okay, all right. Okay. Vision. Looking up at the sky, the near and far buds silhouetted, I can focus on just one layer or another. The curve of branch into twig, studded with almost flower, or the whole shape of the tree, a glamorous tracery, or one individual close-up knot softening. So this next poem is about a place in Maine that has been important to me throughout my life. And in fact, the cover of the book is a view from that place. It's a painting by my mother, Hilary Sallick. This is a winter view. And the other thing to say about this poem is it's made of a few short sections. So you'll hear that. It moves a bit through time. Monsweet Bay. The bay where I learned to swim is a brackish one of channels and rivers. When its tides flow out, it trickles down to mudflat. Once we were 3 children in a small sailboat. A seal looked up curiously at us. The seal was like Bishop's seal, with dark, interested eyes, and it stayed with us for a long time. It's rainy, tide incoming, trees dripping, and the leaves sound like rain as they shiver against each other. Such a silver sound. I could swim in it, I could paint it. The water meeting me would be almost too much, that stepping down naked with awkward balance and mosquitoes. Or to face the blank canvas, wide sky horizon, how to compose it. Hurry, the light is changing, thick, the paint is too thick, or else not thick enough. Watery, it washes the surface. We learn to watch the sunset, a practice, to see and love the changing sky, and then to say how lucky we are, this view for us. Even far away and decades later, I have a scrap of sky. Between the buildings, I see dark clouds with pink scalloped edges, and gliding beneath them, a slender aquamarine strip like a pool. Shallow waters, subtle tide, as if through a keyhole. Just once in those waters we met a seal, but fish, I've seen them jumping, heard the loud splash as they fall back, and the osprey drawing circles in sky, then plunging. Above the shore, fruiting bodies, orange, red, white, rise up, this rain we've had. Some like little brown tubes poking through the forest floor, some like flowers, and the ripples come in sideways, circles within circles, broadening, coming in. The day was inhabited by a dream, a fatigue, a lack of wakefulness. Conversation launched, bobbed, didn't travel far, floated aimless, our little boats never fully aligning, but we sighted each other in the distance. Liquid, limpid, sheer surface tension, what ripples gliding over it or comes splashing through. The day is not done yet. I see the bay silver again, and I'll climb down into it, breaking that surface. Why not now? The truth, or just the dream within the dream. And a seagull cries, calling me down into the clear brown water. This next poem is from the early days of the pandemic. In a state, I'm trying to see, to keep my wits about me. What are wits? The world which, the mind which sieves the world or is soaked by it. Permeable mind, then dry, withered, washed and washing away. I dreamed I was in a virtual meeting while in my bed sleeping. What was I supposed to be paying attention to? Oh no, I've left myself unmuted. Where is the mute icon? I was late. I was supposed to be doing something, fulfilling some important obligation. What was I forgetting to do? Dementia, anxiety, the human state, I've woken into it. The coffee is delicious, but won't help. The daffodils are beginning to pass, but not yet. They stand up easy in the sun as the breeze stirs them all dark and light gold. Where shall I turn my attention now? What is the way forward? I think there is nothing I'm hoping for. Still, this sense of dread, of being invisible, of loving inadequately, of disability, loss, powerlessness, of ink run dry, of masks. The fact of brutality frightens me, what humans are capable of doing to each other. When I see the masked people walking through the days, I remember an image from the page of a book, a muzzled, enslaved woman bound and humiliated by other humans. These masks are cloth, not iron, but that image hovers in a layer of mind with all the fears and the desire to be alive. So this next poem I'll read is, it's a sequence, and it's got a number of parts, sort of fragments to it. And there is a dream in it. So when you hear that, if you're not sure it's a dream, it is a dream. a secret. Everything is fragmentary, word, line, petal, eye, and connected. Nature is made of secrets. Its whisper carries as over water through these dry backyards. I step out with my coffee to feel the air. When we lived in a different house decades ago, Sylvia, who lived upstairs, would climb down the iron steps and walk around her house, looking at what was coming up from earth, how petals unfurled. Sometimes she sat on a small folding chair in the sun reading. Sometimes Mark circled the house with her, every patch of ground to be noticed, and at night we would hear them laughing. I was looking forward at that time to the future, to our children, to how things would be, to the ideal world to come. And now I've passed all those times. It's a glorious morning. I'm thinking there are cages within and without, and I'm surrounded by possibility. The birds are speaking across distances, messages, poem songs, all loaded with communication, the here and now, the experience of being. And there's sunlight on the spruce, its cones dangle from the uppermost branches, while lower boughs at their tips bear swollen raspberry orange nubs. I've had a complicated life, someone told me once in confidence. Isn't any life so if you look at it? Aren't there always versions and layers and mix-ups and half-memories? Doesn't every life contain a secret, the need to express something? Fishing. Thoughts were floating up through sleep, so I rose slowly in the darkness, felt for this book with pen tucked in, and went to the window where there was a bit of light. Should I turn on the lamp? No, I didn't want to wake more. The feeling already was slipping away, leaving bubbles. Would it circle nearer again? Halfway down the right-hand page, I launched my net, scrawl after the elusive. There was something, an infant, clear-eyed, gazing up, the text in hand, cradled. I turned the page, scribbled more, questions of questions, half-formed letters, then closed the book, went back to sleep, not even looking at the time. I slept late. It was Sunday morning, hot, dry, no animals outside the window, but leaves, flowers, branches, nodding. I wondered what I'd written. Would there be anything I could decipher? I poured coffee, turned the page, and found my lines impossibly entangled, for I'd written on top of the words I'd written the day before. I have to ask, what is love? A pure tangle, an ocean of life, a life's work. And what of self-protection, selfish need, stubbornness, those power struggles between us? How do I use you, always calling it love? How is the reverse true? Why and how do we do that? Some flowers are still standing, bright with petals that just begin to curl. Bedtime. The doorbell rang. It was all a dream. I ended my phone conversation with my parents, went to the door. We'd been talking about the kids, how I tucked them into sleep outside on the roof of the van. A homeless man had come by, asked if he could sleep there too. I agreed reluctantly. My daughter wanted a certain pillow or something, which I found in a bag hanging on a doorknob. I was standing in the open doorway of the car to reach her. It was a memory of putting her to bed on the top bunk, although I think her brother usually slept on the top. I zippered her into her sleeping bag. He was on his own, just a bit older and beyond my reach at the farther end. Talking to my parents, I wondered, were the children okay? I would check on them out in the driveway or upstairs in the bedroom. Then the doorbell rang. I saw 2 cops, an array of neighbors, a crowd of strangers. Bob was coming from another room asking who was there. I looked at the cops, unworried at first, then asked, "Are my kids okay?" One of them shook his head, no words, only an expression on his face, grief, pain, and also, "What were you thinking?" I woke up then. I haven't shaken the feeling. I step out. It's soft and warm. I look about me, going through the motions of looking. I walk down the path I've made, just 6 or 7 steps through the tangle of the garden. So I think I'm just going to read, okay, going to read 3 more that are all on the shorter side, especially this one, very short. Unfinished canvas. What new thing can I say? That the morning is cool, the coffee hot, the machinery loud, the garden dry. I have said these things before. That the leaves dangle, the breeze stirs, the people in their houses wake slowly or are outside running. I have said these things many times before. What will be new? How to keep looking to turn things upside down, as the painter does with her canvas in process. Maybe that's almost done. This poem has a kind of a truck machine thing in it that my neighbors who are here are familiar with because it was living in our neighborhood for a long time during some construction. Anyway, I sort of describe it here, and you may not know what I'm talking about, but it is a real thing. What's it called, Tim? That truck? You had the name for it? Yeah. So, anyway, you'll it doesn't really matter, but it beeps a lot. It beeps a lot. It isn't really a poem about it, but it does appear in here, and it took up my attention quite a lot. Sadness is intrinsic. So is joy. Silence is full of dreams, and also reading is in the silence. We watched the moon rise last night from the bridge. A flock of geese carved a path down the river. Then 9 turkeys in 2 trees roosted. Now chickadees are waking. The turkeys have woken and come down from their trees. The mind lacks self-awareness, or else it has too much. In my dream, the country was at war and the children imprisoned. I was realizing it could go on for years. The machines are starting up. The mind seeks truth despite itself and the surrounding forces. A truck is beeping incessantly. Its long arm reaches, lifting the driver above the house. The driver steers the machine to the chosen position. He has something to do up there. I take these notes without question, and the words are more or less true. He buckles the harness, steps out of the cage to perch on the roof. He does something of necessity, and the machine waits in silence. The anxiety of a living thing grows. It's about love is what I know. To push away the dream does not diminish its power. All day long I waited for a feeling, a change, a purpose. Then I took myself into the rain in my long green coat with my rain poncho over it. I wore the poncho when I was 20. I can remember feeling radiant in its pink light one particular afternoon. And today it was perfect still. I walked dry within it, fast over the sidewalks, unless I feared slipping on some slope, and then I became careful. It felt good to move, to be a body that moved easily, freely. I stopped once to watch a puddle, how some raindrops landing became big bubbles that floated 2 or 3 at once downstream over the puddle before breaking on an edge of asphalt shore, and more kept coming. I was interested in their pathways, why and how they came to be those large, clear, individual formations, water and air as one, sailing. So I watched a long time. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Naomi, for your beautiful reading and for being my partner in this long anticipated reading. Yeah.
Thank you all for attending the reading tonight. Thank you, Lloyd, for giving those thoughtful introductions. Thank you, Naomi and Hilary, for the absolutely beautiful reading tonight. Let's give them all a round of applause. We have some books for sale. Poets will be signing books. If everyone could please move your chairs up against one of the walls, that would be great. Thank you for coming.
Sherry picker?
Oh,
Maybe.
Go outside there. On my street also. And they started traveling.
Right.
And it's horrible.
Right. Yeah. That was so cute.